Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having come back on time. We're back, and now we're going to be starting a new panel called a number of educational experiences related to the environment and human rights for the general public. Right, Leire Rodríguez Zubiaurre is here with us, born in San Sebastian in 1987. She has a degree in environmental science from the University of the Basque Country. In recent years, she's been working to promote agroecology at Eco Association, an association of farmers and agroecological citizens in the Basque Country. She's been a member of the Uliako Flower Garden project since its inception. Amaia Otazo has a degree in environmental sciences. She completed her studies in Italy, and since then she's worked in environmental education, citizen participation projects, Agenda 21, among others, and awareness raising campaigns. Since participating in the Ecoleadership project in 2010, she's been a project manager with the Kutxa Ekogunea Sustainable Consumption Project, has been a member of the Ecoleadership network, and she's been the leader of the Ecoleadership group for 3 years. In 2021, she coordinated and led the Ecoleadership project. Welcome, Amaia. And finally, we've got with us Maider, Arnaiz, Igartua, who works at Setem, Hego, Haizea in the fields of education and awareness for social transformation. She coordinates the training provided at the Valio Factoria in Gipuzkoa. And through this training project, Setem aims to promote critical awareness and mobilization among citizens, especially in the field of transformative and feminist production and consumption. Welcome. Well, each one of you are here for a different reason, among other things, because you have different proposals. I believe they're all very innovative. And for all of us to understand what you do, let's start with you, Amaia. Let's talk about what you want to achieve with your initiative. Kutxa Ekogunea works on a number of different projects on rights and training. And you work on eco-leadership and the youth. You always work on sustainability projects, and you suggest that we could have new training pathways. One of the main challenges that we have is the environment, of course. We've said that a number of times today here. And we need transformative solutions here. And we believe that we're going to be needing duly trained people with critical, that are very critical and that are empowered and have the necessary tools available so that they can become eco-leaders. The objective of your project, Eco-Leaders, is, for instance, to provide knowledge about sustainability from a holistic viewpoint. But you want to come up with not individual leaders, but rather groups of leaders. We also want to come up with tools that enable us to implement new things, tools that will enable us to transform our society. We concentrate on the youth. All of us are young people, of course, also the members of the audience. Is that how we define the youth? Well, not quite. We concentrate on people between 18 and 30 years of age because we believe they are the ones that are going to be able to have a say in the new consumption model. And they are the ones that have the necessary training to have an impact on jobs, and new models that can be implemented. There's a second pathway that we're developing for older people because we need to keep getting training, of course, all of us, but we mainly focus on creating new stakeholders for innovation and transformation. As for the gardens that you have in the neighborhood of Ulia, what is this project all about? Well, this is a project we have in San Sebastian that started back in 2015. What we do is that we look after the parks that we have in the Ulia neighborhood. There are a number of greenhouses in these parks that have been there ever since the 19th century. This is a space that closed down, and many neighborhoods would go there and say, oh, but what's that? It looks nice, but it's closed. So what we've done here is that, well, we came to the place and we started a project called Ulia Baratzak, which are the Ulia gardens, flower gardens. We started this project we call Ulia, and we created a flower garden for any neighbor, any citizen to go to, and where everyone can participate looking after that flower garden. There are a number of different initiatives there. We've got some workshops that are being carried out. There are plants that are exchanged by the people. So we work from individual to individual, from citizen to citizen, because we believe that we all have something to share with the others. And this is what gives us a transformative capability in our everyday lives, with the small contribution we can make individually, so that we all together can come up with something beautiful. The Bauhaus presented their award to you very recently. Yes, of course. Concerning the Green Deal, Ursula von der Leyen said that the new Bauhaus is an initiative that is going to bring that Green Deal closer to the citizenship. We believe that the new Bauhaus is working to promote sustainability and teamwork, and of course those are values that we defend ourselves. There are more than 2,000 projects at a European level within this movement, and in San Sebastian, therefore, we have an urban garden. In Barcelona there are more than 50 of them. Imagine how many we will find in Berlin, for instance. We've got a very a very small project in San Sebastian, and we've been given this award. So we're very happy, because there are very inspiring projects there in terms of architecture and design, developed by very good practitioners. So we as citizens, we have managed to get this award, and we are delighted. We've worked very hard over the past few years, and we're sure and certain that this is a very good example of what the future of Europe will look like. We want to have parks and green spaces in our cities. Well, congratulations. We're very happy because you are very close to us, of course. Can you tell us about Setem, Maider? You have this Value Factoria, the factory of values. We've been working for 20 years in social transformation. And in 1991, we started this project looking at, aimed at providing training. It was up and running up until 2017. And then in 2018, there was a reflection process carried out. And this is when we started a new training called Value Factoria. that runs from September to May, and every month we focus on a topic that is always related to consumption. And at the end of the day, our objective is that the whole of the society, and of course the participants in the training, carry out a reflection about production and consumption models, and also about the impact of the model that we now have. And we also focus on possible alternatives that are transformative. And we make these alternatives known because we believe that's going to motivate people and push them to transform the existing model. Some topics we deal with are recurrent because they're very much related to Setem. For instance, our campaign Clean Clothes. Well, that's something that's recurrent in our training sessions. We concentrate on the textile sector. We think about the consumption model there. And we run training courses and workshops concerning topics like ethical funding and consumption, for instance. We also work on the relationship between sexist violence and consumption. We have thought very deeply about that, and we also provide training on these topics. Well, we're here today to talk about your projects, acknowledge them, and congratulations, of course. We want to congratulate you on everything you're doing. We're also here to talk about human rights and to think about the different possibilities we have in our environment in order to find a solution at this level. In your case, what do you think about the youth? Because you foster critical awareness. What do you think about the youth? What's their strong point and their weak point, for instance? Can we talk about that? Well, Ecoleader is a project that was carried out between 2010 and 2015. And back then we observed a difference between, we have observed this year a difference between the young people that participated this year in our training course and the ones that participated some years ago. We observe that they're much more aware concerning sustainability. In the past, they were not so aware about the problem, and now they are closely related to the environment, the economy, and the society, and they have a different perspective, also in terms of training and in terms of their own life experience. So I would say that they are very open, and in terms of critical thinking and critical awareness, I would say that they come from very different backgrounds. But they also have, they're overloaded with information sometimes. Some of them consider that some unreliable sources of information are actually reliable, and in that sense, there's still much to be done regarding human rights. We need to work on that critical vision of things, because the objective is not to tell them this is the right solution, right? So we come to them and tell them, well, this is what we have to do in terms of urban planning. No, that's not the idea. The idea is to show them a number of different experiences. They can then think about them, and they may have the capability of having an impact on transformation and the transformative process. So you work with young people, adult people, people of different ages. So you don't so much concentrate on training, but rather on action. So how do you work with them? on human rights and the climate crisis. Well, Maitena, when Zaira invited us here, she talked about human rights, and we said, well, and why are we invited to this panel? But when you think about it, well, I believe that it's things that are included in our everyday practice and work. It is true that in San Sebastian we have a very privileged society. We all enjoy human rights since we're born. But there are many people that don't have the same situation. We provide training, but what we're offering actually is a space, some room for people to exchange. So everything that has to do with the garden or everything that has to do with food, well, there are people that know about that, but there are some other people that may contribute with their culture, their life experience, maybe not so much knowledge, technical knowledge about gardening. So we learn a lot from people that have different ages. There are different generations that are mixed, and they all make an interesting contribution. We also learn from families, because there are many families that come to us to play, and there's some conflict sometimes in terms of how to look after the garden, because for some children, well, the only thing they want to do is play there. But then discussion is generating about with the families and with the children. This is a daily challenge, and it also applies to adults. In our group of people, our steering group, we've got women between 30 and 60 years of age. So we have very diverse way of thinking. We've got very different life experiences, and the discussion is very, very interesting always. It is also true that given the structure of our facilities, we sometimes cannot reach out to the younger generations, people between 15 and 20 years of age. We're not that connected, that closely connected to them. But we haven't worked specifically, we haven't targeted them specifically on. It's an age group we would like to attract to our park. Well, we'll see how it works out. In your case, Maider, what are the human rights you defend? What is always present in our daily work? It is true that you also work in other territories, and maybe you can make a comparison between them. Yes, absolutely. We work in partnership with others, so we have a local and a global vision. Both of them are present. So we shouldn't forget that our consumption decisions and choices have an impact on us and also on people that live in other countries, because our consumption model is built in a very specific way, and a consumption decision we make here can have an impact on people living elsewhere, and it could be violating their rights. So we always focus on the collective organization. We believe that by fostering social mobilization, we can change this consumption model of ours, because we need to be aware of the fact that the main responsibility is not upon the shoulders of individuals, but we also need to think that large companies and institutions have the greatest responsibility here. And if this society can mobilize, and if a transformation is demanded, it will be achieved. And that's what we focus on. You mentioned consumption, right? In your case, Leire, you have exchanges between individuals. And how do you work in a daily life? Can you give us a specific example for people to understand exactly what you do? What are the procedures you use? Well, I was listening to Maider and I was thinking that for us it's very important that we don't have any currency exchange. We don't use money at all. It's hard, maybe it can be hard to understand it, but we don't use any currency at all. There are many things in our social lives that require currency exchange, but that's not something that happens in our park. For instance, in our park, we have a number of different isolated projects. One of them is a consumption group, a consumers group in the Uliako Park, and there we get to know local farmers and work with them. So again, we have this bond with farmers and their organization. So we generate a new formula and new alternatives that can be implemented.
I think I gave you that example before, right? Perhaps I can't think of any more at the moment, but maybe a bit later on. I mean, for example, we exchange plants. You do that at the market. That's a non-money-based or non-currency-based exchange. So you might think, well, what do you all get out of it? Well, you know, there's maybe just, 20, 30 weirdos who are really obsessed with plants, and you've got your cutting and you take it and everyone, wants one of your cuttings, and when you give someone one of your cuttings, you give them a part of your life, and vice versa when you take a cutting from somebody else. And then, you watch it grow, and it's a wonderful source of satisfaction. And it might seem a little frivolous, but you're talking about the emotional side of things as well, aren't you, of course? And that generates these very healthy emotions, and that helps us to build a healthier society. Amaia, in your case, how do you work on consumption, the affective side of things, the emotional side of things? Because I'm sure you do. Yes, we work on content, and also we work with what happens in the group. When we work as part of a group, we always set ourselves a goal. And that goal is to provide alternatives. Alternatives that can lead to true change. So we have an exchange of information. That's one thing that we do. And then when we work as a group, it's very enriching. We have, maybe 20, 25 young people with very different profiles. We have architects, we have engineers, we have people from the fields of sociology or art. And the exchanges there are real. I mean, we're exchanging ideas. And each person makes their own contribution to build a project. And this small projects can sometimes become sort of a renaissance movement. They can be the seed of something much bigger. It's like having a cutting. You need to see what tools you have to water it, to nurture it. You have a group, you have your place, you have the people that come to support you, but then you have to think, who else should we be talking to? And this is something that we do in our group. So, of course, all of these proposals have to do with a sense of collectedness, a sense of being together, right? And common spaces. Maider, in your non-formal training that you provide, I mean, what's the trajectory? You have to spend some time training, right? But can you tell us a little bit more about this training? Well, as I mentioned at first, we've changed our training model. We changed it recently. We used to offer longer processes, but we saw that it was more difficult to attract people with these types of training sessions. So we changed. We went through a process of reflection, and we decided to create this new model for training. And now every month we work on a different topic. And people can just go to the activities they're interested in. So, for example, there are different types of activities. We have the meetings, the encounters, which are, I don't know, perhaps quite not so practical, and they don't require such a high level of commitment. They're generally just talks or sort of film clubs, for example. And then we have workshops, which are more practical. And then we have training courses, which might last for maybe 7 or 8 hours. And because we do this every month, we try to make sure that the activities are different every month. And then each person can decide what they want to attend. Because what we've seen at the end of the day is that we had to be more flexible with the way in which we did things. We had to adapt to people's agendas and their diaries. So if someone goes to a meeting or an encounter, they're more likely to go to the workshop on the same topic, but it's not always the case. And in fact, they have no obligation to do that. So we've decided to become more flexible because it's difficult to get people to commit. We don't know if it's because of the way if society is evolving or what, but it is more and more difficult for people they seem to be more and more reluctant to commit themselves to longer processes. Yes, well, I think everything's going quicker and quicker. We're all under a huge amount of stress and everything needs to be done by yesterday. I think that has something to do with it. Okay, what about your training system, Maider? Well, we've seen that the context is quite similar. People are reluctant to commit themselves to 8 months. It's difficult. It's a big commitment. So I think the change has been due to the fact. Well, I think it's been accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic, and now we offer both face-to-face and online training. And what's changed? Well, we had more unemployed people before, and then this year, the people that are coming to the training sessions mostly have a job. They're mostly employed, and that's a really interesting change because they're in a position to actually implement the changes or the training. They can actually perhaps. And I think this is one of the advantages of offering online training. And people who aren't able to commit to such a long period of time, we've introduced a sort of a short training program, which lasts only 35 hours as opposed to 120 hours. So obviously it's not as in-depth, but we just think it's like planting a seed. And then people hopefully will want to develop it further in the future because we think there's a lot of things that we can do in many, many places. And giving someone a little bit of training is better than not giving them any training at all. So if people can't commit, then they should have an alternative. And if they can commit, then that's great. But we try to cover as broad a scope of people as possible. Yes, being flexible, of course, is important, and providing a fast response, even though sometimes that's very difficult. Now, Jose from Medtown before, talked about co-production and how great it is. So, Leire, it's not all a bed of roses, right? What are the challenges that you're facing? I know you work with a neighbourhood association, you have a relationship with the public administration. What are the sort of challenges do you encounter? Do you think it is possible to co-produce public policies? No, I understand your question, and I understood what Jose was saying, but I don't really get how tangible. I don't really see how tangible what he was saying. But to try to answer your question and linking it into what we were saying before, what we've seen in the park is that if we offer people a space for change and not just an idea. People respond. I mean, they really want to participate. They want to participate in the transformation of their own lives, in the transformation of the world, because they have a sort of urgent need to do that, because capitalism has sort of brought about a much greater degree of individuality, and a lot of people want to break away from that. In order to do that, we need to move away from individualism towards collectivism. And so in a space such as ours, you can do things, you can do what you like. I mean, it's a space of opportunity. You can grow a tree. You can do what you want. So I think it's a space of freedom. And with regard to social policies, I mean, this is basically just a case of seeing what people want and need and trying to move towards it. I think what we try to do in Ulia is trying to turn ideas into a reality and, trying to make the most of this enthusiasm. I mean, we have 50 people who come to our garden and also people who are involved in different activities. I know there are many more people living in San Sebastian, but look at all of you who are here today. How many of you have actually come and joined in some kind of community work? Very few, I would imagine. Well, this is what we achieve in our park. People come, they join in the community work. But even so, the San Sebastian City Council doesn't recognize our project. They say, yes, it's lovely, congratulations, you're doing wonderful work. But that's it. I mean, we've spent the last 2 years without any kind of help, without some kind of formal bond, some formal framework to enable us to do what we do. For example, the people that come to us every week, they don't have insurance because we don't have a formal agreement with the City Council. We've asked them for this, and we're saying, look, we're doing a lot of work, and we're doing work for everyone. We're doing it free of charge. It's volunteer. I mean, if you had to manage this park, do you have any idea how much it would cost you? I don't know, 50,000 euros a year. But, you can imagine on an annual basis how much money they're saving. And we're doing it all for free in an inclusive way, a participatory manner. And they don't seem to be doing anything on their side of things. But social policies, what are they at the end of the day? Well, they're listening. It's a case of listening to what people want and trying to give it to them. I understand that there's a lot of red tape and it's not always as easy as it may seem from the outside. But at the end of the day, if we want to actually move from words to action, then we need to empower citizens and we need to demonstrate a certain degree of responsibility and take action. And if there are groups working to do that, then they have to be given the tools and the support they need. They need to be seen as partners because otherwise all the words that are just said by the political representatives of our institutions is just hot air. And it's very difficult to engage in a dialogue. I mean, we're always ready, we're always willing. We're really sure about what we're doing. We have firm conviction. We're happy to talk to the provincial council, the Basque government, not just the city council. We're very happy to work with any kind of institutions, but they have to be willing as well. Yes, because we're talking about society, but society is everything, right? The public sphere, the private sphere, the companies, I mean, everyone forms part of society. And you are there, you're very closely linked to the earth, to the soil, and it's quite striking, in fact, that you don't have more help. In your case, Maider, the work that you carry out, what impact do you have in your local area? Well, our aim is to mobilize people, as I said before. We, for example, we want our experience is almost like a benchmark experience. We want to share that with other people because we want other people to see that these experiences exist because that might encourage them to participate in turn. It's like sowing small seeds, scattering the seeds all around. And by doing that, our aim is to mobilize people to and to offer them the opportunity to all engage in the alternatives that are around. But it's a very slow process. It's little by little, because changing society is a mammoth task. And you, as you said before, 50 people come to your garden, right? And I mean, given the population of San Sebastian, is that a big number or a small number? Well, I think it's quite a large number, to be perfectly honest, because things are moving very slowly. But that's our aim anyway. Yes, there are some values that are very deeply rooted in your different initiatives. And I'm sure you can see the consequences of all of this. Maider, you were talking before about consumption. You were talking about how that is linked to chauvinism. How do you approach the gender perspective and gender issues? Well, in our lives, consumption really touches on all areas and all walks of life. And at Setem, Haizea, we've carried out a number of different studies and analyses in different fields to try to analyse this relationship from an aesthetic point of view, but also not just the consumption of goods, but also the consumption of series and audiovisual content and mobility, etc. And in the consumption and production models that exist today, well, they violate human rights. They violate some of the basic principles of it. And we've learnt a lot. We've learnt a lot about how we're all eco-dependent. So our consumption violates other people's human rights because we are all eco-dependent. So we have analysed the values of ecofeminism, and we use that to try to find alternatives. Now, often, I get the feeling that we're preaching to the choir, right? That we're all here, we're all convinced, we all agree. But the people that come to you are already half convinced, right? But how can we reach out to other people? How can we attract people who really don't care about any of this? Well, in the young people in their trajectory, in their life, the idea is for them to create small-scale projects, not so that they can develop them themselves, but so that they can, in fact, work with other people who are around them. So it's not just the work that they've done with us. That's not the important thing. It's the fact that they're actually going to go out and sow the seeds among the people in their environment, and based on motivation, based on emotions. Because you have to find what motivates people. Where do people want to be? You need to analyse this. You need to research this in order to draw conclusions. Our reflection, what we think, is that whenever a new idea is being developed, you need to analyse it. You can't just run with something because it sounds like a good idea or because it's going to boost my ego. No, you have to see whether it's actually going to motivate people in your local environment, whether it's going to unite them. That has to be right at the heart of any idea, right at the start of any project. When you're analysing its feasibility, you have to see whether in the local area that if it's going to bring people together. And it's not just a case of finding people who are already convinced. What we're trying to do is trying to create a transformation that's going to convince people. You need to attract people because it's pleasant, it's fun, or because they feel that they can change things, they will change things, and that's very motivating. I know it has a lot to do with boosting your own ego, but it does work. To start small, and then you need to work up from there. And then, of course, it will depend on the time scale, of course. And when we're talking about leadership, that's really what we're talking about. How can we look at what's in our environment and create something that's going to be of interest to the people around us and that's going to enable us to achieve our ends, whether it be in the field of food or fashion or participatory action, etc. In your case, how do you do it? How do you convince people that aren't convinced? How do you attract people that aren't interested a priori? Well, there's no mystery. We do it by doing things, by telling people what we've done, by disseminating what we've achieved. I think that's really, it's as simple as that. There are people close by who don't believe in our project, and I think there are some people in the City Council of San Sebastian who don't believe in our project. So what can you do in light of that? Well, just continue doing what you're doing, continue believing in what you do. And not all of us here, we're not entirely consistent in everything that we do, because the system impregnates all of us. I mean, we all have our own institutions and our own prejudices. I mean, we need to understand that. We need to accept that. We need to be humble in the way we talk to people, and we just need to offer what we have. You just have to treat everyone as the same. So we need to find what we have in common, and then pull on that thread. So you have this emotional bond, right? And that emotional bond is forged by doing things. Yes, just by talking straight from the heart. That's what you can do. What about you, Maider? Yes, we also try to forge that bond and look for the connections, the points that connect us. And to try to foster motivation, because it's true that the training that we provide, because we change topics every month, we can focus on different issues, very timely issues that are concerning to people at the time. For example, the energy model that we have. This is one of the topics that we focus on, and it's a very powerful topic. And we try to provide training in this particular field. And perhaps we can attract someone who wasn't interested in this beforehand. But it's not as easy as all that, of course. Because if that person hasn't gone through a process of reflection beforehand, then they probably won't even come anywhere near us. But little by little, that's the road to take. Yes, I mean, those of us who work in this field, we are innate optimists, I think, and I think we have to continue to be optimistic in everything that we do. Now, San Sebastian was actually gained a fair trade certificate in 2016. I think Cordoba in Spain has it as well, but I think very few other cities have it. And I think that San Sebastian, does it make a real commitment to fair trade? Is it true? Well, I don't think it does. It's lovely to have that certificate, but I actually haven't seen a real change in the city of San Sebastian. I don't think it actually has made a firm commitment to fair trade. There are different movements that are growing, but I think it's very early days. I don't think we can say that San Sebastian is definitely a fair trade city. I don't think it's any more so than any other city, to be honest. Well, Leire, I think, gestured to Maider so that she could talk. Well, I think that during the pandemic, the concern about fair trade did increase. In the worst months of the pandemic, I think that the shortcomings of the system became very, very clear. A lot of issues that had to do with consumption, consuming local produce, consuming locally, really became of utmost concern to citizens. They became interested in these issues. But then as the pandemic progressed, this sort of concern seems to have disappeared again. And at the moment, I don't think the movement is particularly active. But again, step by step, little by little, I think that little by little, these ideas are impregnating the general mindset that you need to consume organic produce, local produce. There is a movement towards that. There are alternative and more sustainable consumption models. They exist, and they are becoming increasingly well known. But I think that it's not as widespread as it should be at the moment. Yes, If it's good for the planet, then it's good for our health. So it's actually, we can look at it from a selfish point of view as well. I think that all of us who are here and those who are following us from the other side of the screen know that. And knowing that, and having gone through the COVID-19 pandemic, which was a zoonotic disease, having gone through that experience, having seen what we've seen, why is it so difficult for us to actually make these deep-rooted changes that we need to make in our lives? Why is it so hard? Well, I think the first thing is that it involves questioning our own behaviour, and that's not an easy thing to do. Questioning your own behaviour and changing your behaviour in accordance with the answers that you get, that's not easy. And then the system has such a strong structure. There's so many tools, there's so many mechanisms which have been designed to resist any real change that it makes it very difficult as well. So the challenge is huge. We're not something that you can do overnight. Leire, what do you think? Yes, I completely agree. It's very difficult to cope with this. It's difficult to actually do it. It's difficult to change, really. I work with agroecological farmers. I work with a network of farmers as well. And what we've seen is that during the pandemic, there was a really clear need for their services, for what they do. But then, of course, there are a lot of people living on the planet. We've consumed far more than we were supposed to have consumed this year. There's a lot of us, and it's difficult to change so many people's mindsets. But we need to be aware of the alternatives. We need to understand this sort of environmental logic that's behind everything, and then try to be consistent. I think that it needs to be kind of like a personal commitment. It needs to be made by each individual with their local farmer, with their local shop, with the person who works in the consumer cooperative. We need to have a kind of a series of personal commitments, because I know you, I know how you live, I know what you do. So it's much easier for me to make a commitment to you as a person than to a more ethereal idea. So in this sense, as in fact David Boyd said, we need to put a human face on the climate crisis. I think that was a wonderful comment, because when the climate crisis becomes a person, you see it sort of embodied in a person, it becomes much more real. Sometimes some of the young people that we work with are perhaps just a bit stuck. They get stuck. And they're a bit lost. They don't really know what should be the first small steps to take. But I think some young people don't really understand, or they see the magnitude of the problem and they feel very small. And it's true, because the media always send out these very catastrophic messages. And that kind of gives rise to passivity. I mean, it's such a huge challenge. What could we possibly do? We don't convey the message that we are people who can co-produce. So, just to finish, if anyone has any questions, because we need to start wrapping up, but if you do have any questions, please raise your hand and we'll pass you the mic. In the meantime, I'm going to ask all three of you to tell me what human right you work on in your work. Because we're trying to relate everything that we do to action. So I don't want you to be too theoretical. We're talking about action, we're talking about educational action. So what human rights do you focus on? Well, in our case, we work on sustainability, which is very closely related to both environmental rights and all human rights, in fact, because sustainability can't exist unless human rights are respected and vice versa. So I think we work on all human rights. And I think in light of the climate crisis, I think we also work on this right to live in a healthy environment. I think that's perhaps one of the human rights that we work on most. Well, I would say that our human right, the one that we work on, is the right to a healthy environment and the right to dignity, a decent life. And then also, of course, the right to participation, freedom of speech, the right to choose. Well, what about you, Leire? Well, yes, all the ones that you've mentioned, as well as the right to participation, the right to receive information, and, as we said, the rights of people in other countries. I think this is what we focus on a lot. Yes, and that's extremely important, isn't it? Yes, because we all form part of an ecosystem. Right, I don't think there are any questions from the floor, so I would like to ask for a warm round of applause. Oh, no, hang on, there is a question. One moment. Good afternoon. Congratulations on your work. I have colleagues who have done similar work, and they have a major impact on both human rights and environmental rights. I think the idea is to. I was just asking you about the park. Do you just sow seeds of different plants, just sort of to make people happy, or do you plant species that are that are designed to attract certain birds or insects? Have you done that? I didn't know if it was a comment or a question. Is it? I think if it's a question, then the answer is definitely yes. Of course we do. When we work with our plants, it's not just for humans. There are other benefits. I mean, basically, we work with plants as an excuse to meet, and that's true. And we do look after nature, but we also think about the insects and we think about the birds as well, because we consider ourselves to be part of the wildlife. We're the people in Ulia, but we're just one of the many animal species that are up there, and plant species as well. So we see ourselves as part of the ecosystem, and that's very important. And in San Sebastian and in Gipuzkoa in general, it's important to actually produce food projects, because some children came to us recently, and we took them to see the allotment, and we took them to where we had the lettuces planted, and some of the children were saying, "What's that? What's that? Is it salad?" And we had to explain to them that it's not salad. It's an element that is often used in salad. And these are children who live in San Sebastian, where people always say we eat very well. But in fact, the children in our city, or some of them at least, don't understand where food comes from. We don't understand what a lettuce is, that it's only part of a salad, and the tomato is another part of the salad, where leeks come from. So yes, vegetables, fruit, vegetables, flora, fauna, we work on all of it. No one is born knowing. We all need to learn. We live in a complex system, and we need to help people understand more deeply, little by little. Any other questions? Well, if not, then we will say goodbye to Amaia, Leire and Maider with a warm round of applause. Thank you very much indeed. And congratulations.